Hey guys, this is EliteFerrex. Sorry, I know it's been a while since my last video, but I'm here today to talk to you about FamiSynth and what you can do with it to help make your 8-bit music. I kind of want to just review a little bit about what this plugin is designed for, obviously for making 8-bit sounds, but it also has a couple of other features that Magical 8-bit, which is the plugin that I've used for the majority of the other videos, does not have. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that it is capable of. So starting off, this is the plugin here. What we're going to be focusing on are these buttons here on the left and the right, and these 4 different colored sections here, the yellow, green, blue, and purple, which allow us to control the plugin. Now the good news is that because this plugin has these very simple looking controls, it's actually very easy for us to learn to use it. With just a little bit of experimentation, and sometimes just pushing a little button here or there can make a big difference in what we get. So for starters, the most important part about this plugin is right here at the top in the yellow section where it says waveform. And then right next to it you'll see a little image there, and that one looks like a little swoosh line. Now you notice here really quick, I should mention this, where it says waveform there is an up-down button. So to control that aspect of the plugin, we're going to press the up or down buttons on this thing to the side. So if I hit up here, you'll see it will change the waveform, and down will bring it the other way. And if you happen to hit the up or down at the end, it will just cycle it through back to the other side. Now down here you'll see the left or right for the wave shape. And you'll notice that can be adjusted by hitting left or right here as well. And so those are the basics of how we control the plugin. On the other side here, you see we have B and A. These are just simple on-off switches. So you'll notice if I hit B here, the bit rate section will change from 8-bit to 4-bit. And hitting A here will turn the Porta.Mono function to off or on. And so those are the basics. For these other sections down here where you have the arrow buttons, the control pad sort of looking there, D-pad, you'll see here you have up, down, and left, right on the left side and up, down, left, right on the right side. And as you might imagine, these top 2 options are controlled by the left side D-pad, and these other 2 options are controlled by the right side D-pad. So back to where I started, up here at the sound generator, let's take a look at the waveform. So starting off here, we have a simple waveform here, and this is just a basic sine wave. And so you'll see if I hit a key here, there's our very soft sound. It sounds very similar to a square from, say, Magical 8-bit, but it sounds kind of softer. Now, other things you'll notice about this plugin is that we don't have just a flat sound. It's not just a beep. There's actually some play in it, some distortion there. It's going beep, and that's one of the features of FamiSynth, which is down here in the mod generator, which I will get to later. For now, I'm going to disable the modulation on the waveform here and allow us just to hear the plain sounds while I go through here. So again, here is the sine wave, now without any modulation. Pretty simple. Adjusting to the next waveform, we have this one here. All right. Our next waveform is the triangle. Next up, we have the pulse here. So this one is going to sound similar to a 25% pulse. And our last one on the list is the noise. All right. So those are all the basic waveforms. Now, we can drastically change the sound of each of these waveforms by using these other options that we have here. Right, so I'm going to go back to the the sine wave for now, and we'll start messing with some of the other settings. So again, here's our basic sine wave. I'm going to now mess with this wave shape option here, and that's going to change the way the notes sound when we play them. So I'll add a couple ticks here. Add a few more. And go all the way. So now you notice we are much different than we started with. All right, so we'll reset it back to normal here. All right, now if we change the bit rate, you'll notice we get another sound that's a little different. Now this one is a little bit closer to an actual kind of a traditional square instrument like you might get, but again, it's just another option you have at your disposal. And the last option we have here in the sound generator, and this is one of the things I really love about FamiSynth and that makes it so different from Magical 8-Bit, is the Porta.Mono function. So I'm going to hit 2 different notes here with the Porta.Mono function off, and you'll hear what it sounds like. It just switches off, and if we turn on the Porta.Mono, so that gives us that quick slide note aspect of it. All right, so that is a very useful function that we can use in different tracks. I've used it several times myself for a number of different tracks, and it's just another tool that you have for when you need something that sounds just a little bit different. There are other things to use it for, and things we can use it in conjunction with, which I might get into later. But I don't want to go too in-depth with this this video, and I may do kind of some more, advanced usage later. So let's take a look at the next sound, which again is this one here. I've not really sure what to call this one, to be honest, but I don't use it very often. But we can mess around with it and see what kind of sounds we can get. Change the wave shape a little. Gets kind of a harsher sound there. Kind of like how that sounds. Let's try moving it down to 4 bits. All right, so again, just some different options there. And again, we can use the Porta.Mono. Next one is the triangle. And this one, you'll notice, if we bring it down to the 4-bit quality, we can get more of a square sounding instrument. Right, so there's that one. Again, if we adjust the wave shape, we start getting a different sound there. So again, different options. Now, this one, the pulse, as I said, it sounds kind of similar to a 25% pulse. For the most part, when I use this instrument, there are really only 3 possible settings that I tend to use. The first one is as it is exactly right now. I'm sorry, switching back to 8-bit there, is this one, which sounds kind of like a softened 25% pulse. And then if we bring the wave shape halfway up, then we get a 12.5% pulse sound. Or at least very similar to one. And then if we bring the wave shape to maximum, then we get kind of a, I guess, whereas the first sound I gave was a soft 25% pulse, that brings this one to kind of a harder 25% pulse. Right, now again, we can use the Porta.Mono function along with this, and this is actually the instrument I use most often with FamiSynth, is this pulse waveform with the full gauge on the wave shape, 8-bit with the Porta.Mono function on, which allows me to do sliding 25% pulse notes. All right, so that's just kind of the basic functions of the first section, the sound generator. Let's make things a little more interesting here and start using the envelope generator, as this will allow us to tweak our sounds a little bit, similar to the attack, decay, sustain, and release functions that we saw on Magical 8-Bit. But if we're going to be using this plugin, we need to know how to use them here as well. So starting off, we have the attack time, which, if you remember, is the amount of time that it takes for the instrument to reach full volume when you hit the key. So if I bring it all the way down, So there's kind of our very, clear, solid sounding notes. And the decay time is set to full here, which means it will take it a very long time to reach this sustain level, which is, as you can see, none. So eventually the note will fade out to nothingness. And of course we can make that happen faster by reducing the decay time. Okay, so there is that. Now if we turn the decay time all the way off, it happens instantly, of course. So we won't use that very often, unless for whatever reason we needed just some little plinking noises. Now you may have already noticed another thing here, that you actually hear some built-in delay here in FamiSynth when I hit a note. That kind of tick-tick. And that's due to this output setting down here, the delay level. So for now, again, for clarity, I'm going to disable that, and I will talk more about it later. So let's continue here through the envelope generator. So here is our sustain level, and this is what is going to allow us to determine how much the notes fall off within the given decay time. So this allows us to very drastically change the way our notes sound. And again, it's just functioning similar to the way we would do it in Magical 8-bit using the attack, decay, sustain, and release. So let's try bringing the decay, oops, wrong one there. Let's try bringing the decay time down a little, but this time we're going to increase the sustain level. And now you'll notice that it's going to take it a shorter amount of time, but it will keep the note from going completely silent. Now that is, of course, a very different sound than what we started with, which again is important if we want to have some diversity in our notes there. All right, so if we bring the sustain level all the way up, even with our decay time down very low, you'll notice the notes will not go silent. Now, again, another function that's useful here is if we do bring the sustain level down just a little bit, we'll have a note that will start off at full volume, but will very quickly fall to this reduced sustain level, which again has a different sound to it. That might be just a little short for our taste, so let's add a little back in. So now we've got kind of a little like plinking little kind of a plinking noise there, as opposed to the full-on notes that we started with. And then the last one, of course, is the release time, which is how long the note will stick around when I release the key. So I'm just going to tap the key very quickly here, and you'll hear the difference. Right, and again, if we reduce the release time, I'll do it again. But there's a number of things we can do using the envelope generator, which is something you will get used to over time, and it's just something you'll learn to do. Most frequently, when I use FamiSynth, if I'm not going for big, long, sweeping notes, I will often go with a like a 2 to 3 on the decay time, and between a 3 to 5 on the sustain level, to give you kind of those short, a little bit punchier notes than you get with just the solid ones. And I'll open up an actual project file so you can see somewhere where I've used FamiSynth in more detail there, and I'll talk about some of the settings that we've used. So let's get into the other interesting part about FamiSynth here, which is the mod generator. So this is kind of fun. So the mod wave, the first option, allows us to change how the sound that we've selected is modulated within the plugin. So I'm going to go back to just a basic full sound here. I'm going to adjust these back to default, so we just have a simple sound. Now using the mod generator, I'm going to mess with the settings here, and we'll hear what it sounds like. So most importantly, right now you hear no modulation at all. That is because currently the mod depth setting here on the generator is set to nothing. So there is no modulation taking place. So what we can do is just tick a little bit of depth on the delay here, and then you'll hear it come in, which will make it sound similar to what we started with. Now, we can adjust the depth, really, of the modulation by making the depth gauge go higher. But at that point, usually it makes things sound a little bit strange once you get too high, and you'll hear what I mean. So to me, it kind of distorts it beyond a musical use, really. We can also increase the speed of the modulation, or decrease it. Right? So generally, I will keep the mod depth at 1, maybe 1.5 here, which you'll notice this is setting 1, here is the 1.5, if I use anything beyond 1 at all. Because otherwise, like I said, it doesn't really seem like it has much place in making a song unless you were going for something really trippy or whatever. So there is that. The mod delay is the setting that, as you might imagine, determines how much time it takes before the modulation starts to take place. So if we use a very short mod delay, we'll hear that coming in almost immediately. But sometimes, if you're doing a section, let's say, that has very long notes, where you just want the modulation to come in at the very end just to give it a little bit of flavor, for example, but you don't want it to distort the sound on your shorter notes, you can use a longer mod delay setting so that while you're playing simple notes, you don't hear the modulation. But when your longer notes come in, it will start to come in. And 5 is kind of an extreme example. Normally I will run between 3 and 4. So in fact, the default setting of the mod generator when you first open the plugin will be what you see here, the sine modulation, 1/4 beat, 1 tick on the mod depth, and 4 on the delay. That's actually a really good starting point, and it is honestly rare that I change it from there, if I change it at all. But if you're looking for kind of a harder sound, a little bit less like just a flat pulse, and you want it to sound more like a saw or something like that, you can adjust the mod speed up to 1/8 or 1/16, or 1/16 even, to give it that really raw kind of sound. Now, something else that's really awesome about FamiSynth is this setting here, the 1/12 mod speed. And this is one of the rare instances where I will turn the mod delay up very high, because you can get this note that wavers just a little bit, and it reminds me, honestly, of like the Pokemon Tower from Lavender Town in Pokemon, where you have these kind of sweeping sort of string-like notes that take place in there. So there's one possibility there that you can use. It's kind of strange because if you listen to the 1/8 setting... Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong one there. I apologize. Let's try that again. 1/8 setting. It modulates very quickly, as does the 1/16 setting. But for some reason, when we set it to the 1/12 setting, it modulates much more slowly. So anyway, you can think of different ways to use this. I will show you if I can find a plugin, or sorry, if I can find a project somewhere where I used that setting to kind of help the background string instrument stand out a little bit. And we can work with that part there. Now, I've talked about most of the functions here, but I haven't talked about the different uses of the mod wave, really. So if you listen again to the modulation here of the note, you'll see it will follow this sine wave pattern, where you'll hear it go up and down and up and down and up and down, following that curve. If I change the mod wave, now this is an upward, where it's going to start low, go high, and then immediately go back down low and go up high again. So it's actually like a saw wave there. All right? This is the opposite, going downward. So you'll notice now if we increase the mod depth here, we can get some very different sounds there, in a way. So, little things we can have fun with there. Now, this mod wave is going to sound different again. It's similar to the sine wave we started with. The only difference is because it's a triangle, it only modulates upward. It doesn't go below the note you started with. So instead of B, it's just going to be B is what we'll be getting. Sorry for my improv noises there. Just trying to do my best to explain. Now, the last one is this pulse. Now, this is really going to mess with the sound, and if I bring the mod depth up, you'll hear it's going to sound weird. So again, what this is doing is it's basically just going from the note you started to and immediately going to a different note above, and then immediately going back down to the note you started with. Right? And if we increase the mod depth, you'll hear it starts to sound very strange. And if you go really deep, then it just sounds really strange. Yeah, very, very odd noises there. Anyway, we can get some different options there, but what's interesting about this is if we take the mod delay and we bring it up, we get this gradual but still very strange sound. And if we slow it down, you'll hear it get even a little stranger. So again, lots of different options there, and you'll notice this mod wave, this mod generator section of FamiSynth is something that Magical 8-Bit doesn't have at all. And so this is one of the big advantages, again, of FamiSynth over Magical 8-Bit. Now, I will talk, however, about what is a fairly large disadvantage about FamiSynth in just a minute here after I go through the output setting here, the last section. And this is one of its limitations, unfortunately. So anyway, I will bring that up in just a moment, but let's take a look at the last section. I'm going to go ahead and reset our mod here so that it doesn't mess with our notes. Back to normal. Okay, so in the output setting, the first option we have here is the octave, which you'll hear just changes which octave of the note we're playing. So there's that. Transpose, again, will allow us to change the sound a little more. So if for whatever reason you want to go up an octave, but not an entire octave, you can bring the octave up, for example, and then transpose down a little. So now, for example, I'm actually hitting the C note, but what you're hearing is, of course, an F. Right, so me personally, I do not use the octave or transpose options when I make music, but just to know that the functionality is there if you decide you want to. Down here, you'll also notice there is a volume setting, so you can adjust the volume of the sounds directly from within the plugin, as well as altering them in your audio interface of choice. So just very simple. Simple stuff there. And now the last option, the delay level. So again, another advantage of FamiSynth is that it has a built-in delay function. It's very simple. It doesn't have lots of options to it, but it is, again, one small advantage that it has over Magical 8-Bit, where in order to make delay with that, we either have to use a second channel and copy the notes and move them later in the piano roll, or we have to do it using, you know, a mixer effect, such as an actual delay plugin or something. The only other disadvantage of the delay feature here in FamiSynth is that it only has one timing option on the delay. In other words, we cannot adjust the delay forward and backward, only how loud it is. So again, you hear the notes there are changing based on our delay level. So here the delay is very loud. Here it's very quiet. and here it's non-existent. So that's the kind of last basic feature that FamiSynth offers for what you can do with it. So anyway, now I said there is a disadvantage of FamiSynth that I wanted to talk about, and I will do that here. So let's bring up a piano roll so you can kind of see here. I will turn the... I'll do that later. Let me just bring up the piano roll here. So here we are. I'm going to lay out a basic note here. Here we go. Now, pay close attention when you hear this note, and I think if you pay attention, you will see the big disadvantage here. Let me just do this. Let's adjust the velocity here. And now let's see what it sounds like. And you may have realized the limitation of FamiSynth here. Despite the fact that here, within the interface, I've adjusted the velocity level of the notes so that it should go loud, quiet, FamiSynth does not support that input. So if you want to make notes of different volume in FamiSynth, you actually have to have separate channels for the plugin to do so. So if I want to do, for example, what I've just done here, I would have to clone our FamiSynth channel here and have the second one with reduced volume. And now you'll see we can get that effect we're looking for. So that is one of the disadvantages that FamiSynth has, unfortunately, but it's something you just kind of learn to work with. Anyway, so that's one of the main limitations. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this Porta.Mono function here, because it is a little bit tricky to figure out if you're not used to it. So let's again bring it up here. So here is our first note, and I'll bring in our second note. That's a little loud. Let's use a lower one so I don't deafen you. Here we go. So we're going to go ahead and try this, and you'll notice like this, the Porta.Mono function does not kick in. So in order to fix that, we need to make our notes overlap. So I will bring this one to where it's over the other, and now you will hear the Porta.Mono kick in. There we go. So, and now another thing is, unlike FL Studio's built-in slide note feature, the Porta.Mono function on FamiSynth cannot be, the rate at which the notes slide from one to another cannot be changed. So whether I have it only overlap at the beginning here, or I have it overlap all the way to here, it will sound the same. So again, another small limitation of its ability to do that. So I generally will not use FamiSynth for, long notes where I want it to kind of slowly rise up, boop, kind of thing. So instead, I will use Magical 8-Bit if you know using the positive or negative sweep and can get the timing right, but it's not something that FamiSynth is really designed to do well, in my experience. Another thing you will have to be careful of when you use the Porta.Mono function on FamiSynth is that the note will always slide to whichever note is the newest note. So again, we would have to do something like this. But you'll notice if I have notes like this, and let's say I wanted it to go up to this note and then say come back down to this note here, it will not do that. So even though this note continues, again, this is how it differs from FL Studio's standard notes. Let me lengthen these so you can hear it just a little better. So if I drag this one all the way out, with FL Studio's slide notes, it would go boo and come back down, but this one will not. As soon as it reaches the end of this F note, it will stop, ignoring the length of this D sharp note that it started with. So something you will have to keep in mind. All right, I'm going to open up a project file I have here and show you one of the ways that I used FamiSynth in there. Now this is a track that is very close to my heart. It's called And For Us All, and it comes from an album I released called Retro Revive. And it is a very interesting song. It uses 8-bit sounds as well as 16-bit sounds that came from a Mega Man Battle Network 3 sound font. So anyway, I have some Fami channels in here that you'll notice I labeled Fami25. So let's bring up one of the channels, I'm sorry, one of the patterns that has a FamiSynth instrument on it here. So here's one. Alright, so I'm going to mute all of the other channels except our FamiSynth ones. Now here you'll notice really quick, I have FamiSynth set to this option here, 25. You'll notice it is centered in the panning. This one is panned to the left, and this one is panned to the right. Again, FamiSynth does not support, for example, FL Studio's built-in panning feature that you can access from the piano roll. So if I go here and switch this to note pan, it will not actually do anything, even though you'll notice here it's set all the way to the left. It will not affect whether or not the note is centered or not. In order to make left and right using FamiSynth, you will have to do it from the bass channel settings here, the bass channel panning. So anyway, you'll hear kind of what I did here. Right, so there's that part. And if you look at this first section here, the one that's on the right channel, you notice the notes are very simple laid out. Boo, 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 boo. Then if we go to the center channel, you'll notice here, we have some overlapping notes. And this is so that we can take advantage of the Porta.Mono function here. So this just gives us a little bit of a different sound. If we listen, it goes from the boo, 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 to allowing us to have a little bit of kind of, attitude with our notes, so it's kind of a beow kind of sound. So there's one of the reasons I would choose to use FamiSynth here, as opposed to, say, Magical 8-bit. In addition, you'll also notice these channels have their delay turned on and nice and loud so we can clearly hear it. And as I said before, here if you look at the envelope generator section, you'll notice I have the decay time set to 3 marks and the sustain level set to 6 marks, which gives me those short, punchy notes that I want for this section of the song. So there's another use for it there. So that you can kind of hear what I was doing in this section, I will turn on the bass sounds so that you can kind of hear how those notes go along with what's happening at that point in the song. So here is what it sounds like with the bass notes going. So there's that. So as we have these bass notes going, I have these FamiSynth sounds going back and forth from the left and right channels, kind of helping to fill up the sound spectrum here, which is something I talked about extensively in the video I made regarding melody. So I won't go too much more into detail about it here. Now I also have these Fami 12.5s, which again, the way I make a 12.5 synth using FamiSynth is using this waveform option and bringing the wave shape to 50%. So there's that. So let's find a pattern where I used that instrument. Right, so on this pattern called break lead here, it's going along with part of the main instrument. And so this here is just simple notes, as you can see. So I will play them here for you. Sorry, I know I'm moving a little slow today. Here we go. Now you'll notice that one is on the left channel there, and so that is because we have other instruments going on. So when we put these all together, you'll hear it sound a little different. So I will go ahead and unmute all of them so you can kind of hear what's going on at this point. So this is what the whole track actually sounds like with this other vibe synth instruments going together. And so you can hear that when I set this channel to the side, kind of exactly why I did that. Alright, so let's look at one other thing I've done here where I used FamiSynth as a lead instrument here, and you'll notice that the reason I used FamiSynth is because I wanted those sliding notes that I just can't get using Magical 8-bit. So if you look at this FamiSynth channel here, you can see I have some more slide notes here using the Porta.Mono function. So here we see there's an overlap. Let me put this one on by itself so you can actually hear and see. So we've got those slide notes back there to help carry the melody along. And again, I chose to use FamiSynth for that because I can't do it with Magical 8-bit. You'll notice on this instrument here I'm also using the mod function, using only the default settings, the regular mod wave, the 1/4 beat on the mod speed, 1 tick of mod depth, and 4 ticks of mod delay. So again, like I said, those default settings there actually tend to work pretty well. And so I do that just to kind of give this section of the song some life in it. So we've got these basic squares that help fill up this melody channel here. I know I said I wasn't going to talk much about melody, but since I'm already here, I may as well include a little information. So this is kind of what we do to fill up the sound spectrum, is we have these squares that switch back and forth between the left, right, and center channels. Now this, of course, sounds fairly plain by itself, but along together with these strings, actual strings, and this bass note here that you actually get kind of a much more full sound that carries it forward. And if you look here, this is a 25% pulse that came from this sound font, and so this sound font is kind of difficult to use because you'll notice all the instruments here are just called type yada yada within a coding address for use in the actual game. So I actually had to go through and make a list of what each of these patch and bank numbers represent in terms of sound, and so this is a specific 25% pulse sound. So, but again, before I've talked about using these instruments to make string effects in our 8-bit music, so here's kind of what this sounds like by itself. Which, when put together with this actual string sound from the Mega Man Battle Network 3 sound font, gives us actually a very cool sound. Alright, so putting that instrument there together with our FamiSynth instrument here alongside these other ones, we get a really cool sound overall. So there's all that put together. This track was a lot of fun to make. I had a great time. And it's just, again, this is a very cool track because of all the different synths that are used. We have some, this sound font that we use that has these 8-bit synths in it, built in along with the others. We have the noise function there, a percussion channel that comes from the plugin as well. This A320, which is actually a MIDI sound font that includes a specific instrument that I used in here to sort of back things up. But it's very interesting because this entire track is composed with nothing really more advanced than 16-bit sounds. But even using this in some other sound fonts and such that are arguably much more advanced, FamiSynth still finds its way in here to be useful. And specifically for this one, in addition to being able to have those slide notes, which, although yes, I could replicate those with FL Studio's function using the other sound font, with FamiSynth I can put that together along with the modulation to give this that kind of that I'm looking for. And again, you'll notice none of these tracks are assigned to any mixer channels. So the delay effect that is present on these FamiSynth channels as well is due entirely to the output setting there. So it kind of can simplify that in that regard. So I will play this track just a little bit so that you can kind of hear what it sounds like and sort of the aesthetic that went along with it. And maybe you can try and pick out the FamiSynth instruments as it plays. So that's the general gist of this track. And so I've talked about some of the basic functions we can do with FamiSynth there, and sort of what it sounds like in a more complex track, such as this one. I think I'm going to call the video there. Hopefully you find this video helpful and can use FamiSynth in your own work. If you have any questions about the plugin that you think I might be able to answer, feel free to shoot me a message and I'll be glad to help you out. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it helps you in your work. Thanks for watching.